Is it just us, or is anyone else coming in?
Just gonna be us two and
Okay.
or us three. I'm sorry. Oh, and we just went live, so everybody knows that. Just us three, by the way. Welcome everybody to number. This should be number 11. I don't know why it's running number 10 there. Anyways, it's episode 11 of Making Comics on my channel. I'm Bruce. With me today is Von Klaus. I'm going to call him Von from now on, and Jeremy Lott. And we're going to be talking about writing for comics specifically, but just writing in general, things of that nature. And then we'll talk about their projects. They both have some two successful Indiegogo campaigns running. Jeremy's, I think, is about to end. Vaughn's Monster MD is just getting started, really. You had a lot of success. That's greatness. So, yeah, I'll just turn it over to you guys. Just kind of introduce yourselves and just give us a little background, if you would.
Vaughn, why don't you go first?
Sure, bud. I'm Von Klaus. I grew up a lot in Oklahoma, moved on to Chicago and studied film in Chicago, and specifically story and screenwriting was where I focused. I've been writing comics for years. My first one was made when I was 9 years old, and I made a trilogy about a pistol-toting possum and his gang of Danger Dog and Radical Rabbit taking on the evil lizards. Very inspired by the Ninja Turtles at the time. They were the brand new hot thing in comics back when I made this. And
nice.
Since then, I've loved comics, and I've loved making them, and I've made them kind of in weird tangents over the years, going through phases of making comics, and I never really answered the call to make comics until now with Monster MD to really make comics,
Right.
So it's so here I am.
Oh, great. And thanks for coming in tonight. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, anytime. So how about you, Jeremy? What's up?
Yeah, my name is Jeremy Lott. I grew up in Washington State, where I still live. I live right on the Canadian border in a little Dutch town called Linden. And I liked comics before I even read comics, because I watched the movie Condor Man, which is about a comic book artist who moonlights as a superhero / secret agent and saves a beautiful Russian agent from KGB spies. And it was just wonderful, good fun. And this was way back in the day. I guess the movie actually came out in 1978, which was the year I was born. And it would have been a few years later. The movie rental stores would rent you VCRs as well, because a lot of people couldn't afford VCRs. And so my parents would, as a treat, we'd go to the video rental store and rent a VCR. And then I just looked at the Disney shelf, because it's a Disney flick. And I said, well, how about this Condor Man movie? And boy, they regretted that, because then every time we went to rent a VCR, I had to rent Condor Man. I have watched that movie more times than I even know.
No,
that's a cool offbeat film that was kind of ahead of its time in terms of superhero stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so anyways, that was it. He's a comic book artist and writer who is also a superhero. And so this predisposed me to think well of comic book artists and writers. And when I got into my teens, I was a heavy collector in the 90s. And then I decided I was done. When I turned an adult, I was done with comics. I put away childish things, and I went and got a real job and spent 7 years in DC and said, this sucks. And I came back and picked up comics again, and really haven't looked back. These last couple of years, I've loved seeing a lot of people who are just people who are fans who just love comics saying, you know what, I'm going to make my own comics. And I said, you know what, I'm going to do that too. So my comic is Movie Men, and it's tomorrow is its last day on as a campaign on Indiegogo. It's funded, but it could be more funded, and I love for you guys to check it out.
Yeah, for sure. I've got that up, and I've got Movie Men up, and I've got Monster MD up. I got the links in the description in the video. Let me make sure though. I'm going to check because I'm pretty sure I did. Yeah. I got him in there. So, and we got Sept in the chat. He's a regular, 7 of 9. Hey man, how you doing? Glad you showed up. If you got any questions for these guys, just fire them away. We'll talk. So it's interesting, Vaughn. I've noticed a lot of people. You mentioned you had kind of a background in the film industry, coming from that kind of background. I noticed there's a lot of writers now turning to the comic industry to get their stories told. I was talking to Jeremy before we went live, and I have a friend right now I'm working with on his. He had a screenplay. He's got a bunch of screenplays, but he has this one that he wanted to turn into a graphic novel, and I told him I'd help him with it. And I was curious. I said, "Well, why this? Don't you want to try to shop it around and try to get a film made or try to sell the rights or whatever?" And he said, "Well, I can." He said, "I can with a graphic novel, I can get this out right away, and I'm not, subject to, different rewrites of it. If somebody buys the script and they want to redo it, or they don't like." So I find
exactly.
that yeah. So,
it's amazing how fast working in the film industry will turn you off to film.
that's what I've heard. Yeah.
It's amazing, and how you see how your dreams of being a director or a writer are really they're pipe dreams more than real ones, because it's just you are working for studios and there's a lot of producers who are going to change your work. There's a lot of interference with the creative expression. So it's like a miracle to me when something good comes out of film and television. Like, I appreciate the good stuff that much more these days. And it's pretty incredible how I was dead set on going to LA and trying to roll the dice on that. And then I changed my mind and moved to comics instead. So I can really relate with your friend here. There's no interference with studio stuff. It's completely yours when you do comics.
Right.
And it's so appealing and so much fun. And it's fun. And sure, there might not be as big of an audience, but these days with the way, social media is and everything, you can make your own audience. So it's pretty interesting. I made some short films, and I also just hate being on a set, man. Mm-hmm. Like, it is the most boring, exhausting thing I've ever done. I just like being behind the scenes and writing anyway. So I knew I didn't want to direct. And then something kind of amazing happened. Something that's very Comicsgate oriented, actually, way before Comicsgate. I had one of my scripts that was an award-winning script get picked up to be produced and made. So big possible career maker for me.
Right.
And then they hired an SJW to direct it, and he immediately did these intense rewrites on it and turned it into this something beyond, like, not even close to what I had written. It was almost the opposite of what I had written. I'd written a story about brotherly, like, two stepbrothers learning how to become good brothers. No, it's not the movie Step Brothers. And but they learned how to become, real brothers. And this guy turned it into this like political statement on how white people aren't very nice to Native Americans, and how like this racial war thing. And it was horrible. And it potentially hurt my career. And I was just blown away how easily he did that, and how corrupt and I saw how film and everything was turning into, an activist playground. And I was so turned off. I just started pouring myself into, I was working as a manager in a tea house, and while like serving tea to little old ladies, I was behind the bar writing Monster MD, coming up with these great ideas. And from there, it's just, you have all the control and power you really need when you make a comic. It's just so much more fun than film, man. So much more energy, so much more positivity, for me, at least.
Yeah, and I've noticed that with different, especially different writers and different screenwriters talking about things like that. I even saw an interview, I think, not too long ago with George Martin, Game of Thrones fame.
Yeah,
he was talking about that too. How Hollywood's a weird beast, where you might think you have this fantastic script, and they option it, but they turn it into something completely different of what you were intending it to be. And so, not to be married to your work, because it just might get changed,
Uh-huh.
So
That's why I don't even date my work. We're just friends with bennies.
Right.
Friends with bennies.
Right. Love them and leave them, right? Yeah.
Well, I mean, look, if you can, if it's in movies, right? If you can direct it, then you can control it, right? And so there are some people that will write their own script and film it, and great. I've heard in television it's different in the sense that the director is contractually obliged to shoot everything in the script. So if you can actually get the script sort of intact, that's what's going to be on the screen.
Oh, right. Yeah, I guess if you have that kind of control, then you're in good shape. I mean, somebody probably like Peter Jackson or somebody like that probably has total control over their script, and they have a script writing partner and all that stuff. So
but I mean, that would also explain why television has gone through kind of a renaissance in the sense that, writers who really are serious about writing things that they want to see filmed will go to television rather than movies.
It's true. My friend from film school that I made a few movies with is a writer on Swamp Thing right now. So good on him. He's moved on into television when he originally wanted to do movies. So
right.
The second golden age of television is definitely churning out good, higher quality content, which is just awesome.
Right. Well,
and they better, dude, because the regular consumers are getting high tech, really nice cameras in our hands, and we're getting to where we can make our own stuff. They need to stay ahead of the curve.
Up your game, bros.
Yeah. Well, they have to. I mean, just like you said, it almost runs parallel, right? It's the same way with comic books. The big two, if you want to call them the three, the big two plus, like Image and a couple of the other, like
Dark Horse,
especially Dark Horse. Back in the 70s and 80s, it was Kitchen Sink Press and not Eagle. What was it? First Publications. But
a lot of good stuff.
Yeah. Right now, I mean, that's the way it was back then. Right now, it's turning into the indie market. You don't have to go Marvel and DC now to find entertaining stories. And I think the success of both of yours campaigns just recently and prior campaigns prior to that, I'm talking about like Shinobi Sasquatch. I mean, Heroes out right now, Narwhal stuff, Ethan stuff, all this stuff is showing that there's an alternative way to go get your comics or go get your comic fix, right?
Yeah, I'm like a junkie. I'm waiting for Narwhal's book to get to me. I read it. I never read this stuff in digital. I'll download it and just kind of take a look at it and then go, okay, I'll wait for the print to come, right? And in his case, I just looked at it and read some and kept reading it. And finally, 150 pages later, I'm done. Right?
You're done, right? Yeah.
And it was great.
What a great comic! What a great artist! I mean, every time I talk to him, it takes me back to just getting to hang out with my artsy friends. Growing up in high school and stuff, and just always a new creative idea coming out of him. Lots of great energy, just a fun all around good guy.
Yeah, he is very, very fun guy. Enjoy talking to him a lot. So, but yeah, it's the same parallel. And now in movies and TV, now there's Netflix, there's Amazon, there's what's another independent? Well, all these other little cable studios are starting their own production companies. I mean, The Walking Dead is AMC, right?
Yeah.
So, they do, so they're starting to do all these, what some might consider independent from, like mainstream Hollywood productions, and, and they're starting to be successful. And so you're right. The people that used to hold the reins for a long time better get their shit together and figure out, hey, we got to start putting out quality work, because the consumer will just get it somewhere else if we're not doing it. So
it's kind of fun, isn't it? I mean, I've never been I've always studied and admired growing up the fringe kind of outsider artists who broke in and did something new and interesting, and now I get to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's really exciting stuff. When I look at the work that we're all producing, I'm thinking this is the vertigo that DC should have gone with instead of the more social justice-y version.
Yeah. Well, I think I
Oh,
mean,
bad.
well, I think with stuff like that, like Marvel and DC, I don't know so much about Marvel. DC, I have this opinion that I really think, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I really think that what they're really trying to do, the bottom line is they're just trying to make more money. And so they think they're tapping into this big resource when they do things like that. And then they figure out, wow, that's not really that big of a pool of people that want this stuff.
Right.
So
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you because they do shift and pivot and try to give people what they want more than Marvel seems to these days.
Yeah.
And they cut their book line to save money, and then to make money off their heavier hitter books.
Yeah.
And they are suffering a little bit, but like I think they really do care more than Marvel and strategize more around what people want. It's just they're falling for these lies that are kind of hip right now in media.
Yeah, exactly.
About promoting social justice activism and about promoting this or these ideologies that I get why people fall for them, because they come shrouded in so much virtue and so much goodness, and you're told how virtuous these ideas are, and it's easy to go along with them and believe it. So I don't hold it against them too bad.
Well, yeah. I mean, I really think. I'm sorry, Jeremy. Go ahead.
I think DC is capable of writing itself and will over the next few years. There a lot of the business things that they eventually do get with a program of people want X or they don't want X. Takes them a while to learn. That's fine. I don't think Marvel is. We'll see. I hope I'm wrong.
Well, I truly believe, I think this is what the difference is. Just my opinion, obviously. Whenever you have to say that, it always just seems wrong. Though this is my opinion. Of course, it's your opinion. You're saying it, but anyways.
Man, I thought it was somebody else's.
Exactly. I think that DC still cares about comics and comic book industry, whereas Marvel maybe they might, but I think that they have that fallback position. They have that golden parachute, which is Hollywood movies, right? The MCU, which makes them a lot of money. I know that they're two separate companies, but they're owned by the same umbrella. So it's not like it's a big deal for them. But I do think in some way DC still cares about comic books and the graphic novel medium and telling good stories and taking care of their iconic characters and things like that. So I see them, I think they'll get better, over time. So.
I just bought Last Night on Earth today. I mean, I'm excited for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think they're putting out interesting stuff. So I'm surprised. I grew up being a Marvel kid, and now here I am shifting over.
Exactly. That's me. Well, I've always been a big Batman fan. So, but so that leads me to some questions for you guys. How did you get into writing? Has it always been something you wanted to do? Is it were you inspired by did you have an epiphany one day and you're inspired by one thing that said, this is what I want to do for a living, or I have all these stories to tell? Or did you just get tired of, I don't know, an old job like me? I got tired of hauling garbage, so I said, I want to be an artist. So but just give me a little backstory on you guys. Like what got you into writing?
I've been a writer for 20 years. Actually, a little more than 20 years, but let's just say it's 20. It's a good number. I was the end of my high school years, didn't know what I was going to do. I lived with my parents because obviously I was still in high school. This was a bad time for us. My dad had quit his job and spent about a year and a half looking for another job and doing every crappy, horrible job under the sun. He worked at a juvie detention center. He sold vacuum cleaners, soul destroying stuff, basically.
Exactly.
He was asked me, what do you want to do now? And I said, and I knew I could write reasonably well, but I didn't have a computer. And that was the price of entry. Basically, you needed a computer in order to get anything to anyone. And you know, I said, well, I like to be a writer, but I don't have a good computer. And so for my birthday, my parents got me a computer that was just complete garbage. And you know, I tried to put a good face on it because we didn't have any money.
Right.
And eventually, my mom basically waterboarded out of me that this is horrible, and tells my dad. And so he goes down to Circuit City, slapped his credit card on the counter, and said, "I need a new computer for my son who wants to be a writer."
Right.
And so I came home, I saw the computer sitting there, and I flipped out because this was not money that we had. And I said, I got to make this work. You know, I have to find a way to make this pay. That's the end of it. And so I, you know, reached out to every editor I could find out there, asked, you know, started writing all kinds of stuff, and just seeing, you know, who I could interest in things. And I got published in hundreds of publications. Actually, it's probably over 1,000, but I've lost count.
Mm-hmm.
And worked that into a writing career. Went to DC for, you know, 7 years. I worked at some think tanks and magazines and that sort of thing.
Very good.
I've done, you know, I've in my Indiegogo page, it says that, you know, I covered the world's chillest armed standoff that was in Burns, Oregon. I interviewed Jerry Falwell in my boxer shorts. Of course, it was over a phone, but still. And by probably the future Prime Minister of Britain called me McVeigh, as in Tim McVeigh, in an email once. When he was shooting a piece down, I submitted to his magazine. You know, it was a fun career, but in journalism, it became increasingly clickbaity and just not what I wanted. And also, it's primarily concentrated now in DC and New York, and there's a little bit in LA, but not much. And I left there, and I could keep working for some of these things as a contractor, but not as an employee. And you know, eventually I just said, I don't know. So I do corporate writing now to pay the bills, and then I'm doing this comic book thing, and just hoping it takes off. And you know, we'll see what the future holds.
Right. Right.
I've written several books. I wrote The History of the Vice Presidency. I wrote a book on hypocrisy. I wrote a biographical book about William F. Buckley. I was the recognized ghostwriter of a former governor of Maryland's memoirs, and you know, that sort of thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. You told me that you did a lot of nonfiction. So
Yeah. But there's a lot of storytelling in that, right? And so
right.
you kind of work that into fiction, then you realize you have even fewer restraints than you did before. It's wonderful.
Well, yeah, that's something I've learned while I've been trying to learn everything I can about writing. Well, at least what you can find on the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, that nonfiction writing can be just as taxing and demanding as fiction writing. So, yeah.
Oh yeah, some of the historical stuff has some of the best story to it.
Yeah.
When I there's a reason Devil in the White City sold so well. You know, it's an incredible story.
So, how about you, Vaughn?
Well, I've been writing ever since I was a little guy, and just loving it. I won awards and stuff growing up, and I would write instead of doing my homework a lot. I always kind of rebelled against schoolwork with creative work throughout growing up. It's just my style. In fact, I failed creative writing class in high school, probably because I was writing better stuff on my own time, you know. And I didn't like all his weird little rules. That's what I always do. I'm just a little rebellious little punk kid. But I ended up drawing a lot too. And I loved drawing. I loved writing. And I would go back and forth between drawing my own comics, writing them, or both. And once I started medical school back in the day, all I did was draw comics, and went through a little, you know, renaissance with that. And then I ended up moving away from that for a while, running my own business, and realizing that I loved writing movie scripts. and learning the art of that over the years. And that's when I ended up going to film school and realizing that I don't really want to be a director after directing a little bit. And I really want to focus on the screenplay aspect. And that seemed to be where I was strongest. My film school teachers were pretty badass. They were real deal film people. They weren't just professors. They had real experience in the industry. For instance, one of my teachers helped write Revenge of the Nerds. One of my teachers, produced some like big Hollywood movies. But when they saw that I was like the go-to writer, or treated me as that, and gave me a lot of opportunities to write stuff for them or for their animation. Like I got to write something for some of the advanced animation classes that they made, stuff like that. I realized this is where I'm shining. This is where I'm doing well. So after school, I started just working on all these stories, stacks and stacks of them, stuff that would make great comics. And I went from there and just kind of did my blue collar work to pay the bills, and would write whenever I had a chance. And I got back into comics again. It's like this siren that keeps, like, I avoid for a bit and then it calls me back. Now I don't think I'm going to avoid. I think I'm just here to stay because I just love it too much. And I worked on things like a feudalistic Japanese kind of horror story about a guy who hunts witches, and a kind of samurai setting in Japan. And then I moved on from that to Monster MD. And that was the idea that got me so excited that I just had to make it, so started working on that. And ever since, I've gotten jobs in writing, everything from copywriting to writing a few scripts here and there for people. Nothing too big, but to this day, I write copy, but I also tell stories through film for different organizations that do a lot of filming of animals and tell their story, things with work with conservation and such. So it's a storytelling life for me, man. That's where I'm at right now.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, that's great when you can incorporate something you really love into something that pays the bills as well. I'm an artist at heart. I dabble in writing, and I do my best at writing, but art is my forte, I guess. Is what I like to do. And ever since I was, I don't know, I think it's been almost 25 years now, I've been able to have art pay my mortgage and things. And so that's always good, because I've done the other thing where I've bust tables at a restaurant, I've hauled garbage,
I did one job where I spent 8 hours a day watching frozen fish fall into a box.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go. There you go. Exactly
I worked in a industrial pipe factory, and I pulled lice off screaming kids' heads.
Oh God.
Oh God. I've been a security guard at multiple places. One of them was a more rough and tumble rock and roll club where fist fights happened.
Right.
I've done it, and I don't want to go back to it. I don't.
Well, that's probably something that one of my questions was going to be, what motivates you guys for to do writing and to tell your stories. And I imagine part of that motivation is, I don't want to go back to doing that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
No, I ask a lot of people, why do you get out of bed in the morning, right? And there's different answers. And one person said, I do it so I can keep a job so I don't get deported to Canada. Right. For me, it's just I find life so amusing, and I find writing very amusing as well.
Yeah. 7 of 9, who's always a really good chat viewer he's got a question. He's got a question for you guys. He says, do you have an entire story in your head before writing it, or just the beginning, middle, and the end of the story that you eventually tease out?
Good question. I like my story concept, but putting a whole story in my head is impossible for me. There's too much. Mm-hmm. I like my concept that excites me, that I feel that meets a lot of conditions, mass appeal to a lot, to a whole audience, to that is an exciting enough idea to make me want to keep writing it and finish it, because it stimulates me. And then from there, I start building. I start writing before there's even much of a story, you know?
Right.
And then your beginning, middle, and end will form itself when you start doing your structure. I'm a very big stickler for structure. I think it creates more powerful, more effective storytelling. So I'm all over that too. Yeah. But I mean, a lot of my stories really start off as just, what if a guy was a doctor to the local monsters and he had to hide it and he had to build a lab and somehow take care of these things without them killing him. And then from there, it just begins a whole story coming out in my head. That would maybe have to be a short, you know, where it's easy to kind of see the beginning, middle, and end, because it's not too much. There's not too much length to it. But other than that, yeah, man, it's all about me sitting and typing and writing and developing ideas more than it is coming up with all of it at once. You know?
Yeah, right. As you go. Well, what about you, Jeremy?
I mean, it depends. I've done it in many different ways, and I've gotten, you know, bits or large swaths of stories. There's a comic book that I'm working with a writer or with an artist in Virginia on called Murder, and I had kind of the basic idea, but what I did, like I was just noodling it, and finally, just the whole thing was there in my head. And the problem was that if I sat down to write it, you know, this page, this panel, etc., I'm not saying I would have lost it, but I was worried about that.
Mm-hmm.
So instead, I just sat down and wrote it treatment style. I wrote, I don't know, 800 some odd, 900, something like that, words that just beginning, here's the whole comic. And it didn't have all of the dialogue. I'll have to go back and do some dialogue fixes, but it had all the important parts of the dialogue.
Right.
So I did it that way. With Movie Man, the problem was that it was initially going to be a 16-page story, so I wrote it as a 16-page story, and I had to compress a lot of things and cheat a lot, and it was going to be part of an anthology, and eventually I just decided to do it as its own thing, and then I realized, well, 16 pages is nice, but it's, you know, you're going to want to be at least 20 to be a comic book, right? And then I said, well, I cheated, so let's uncheat this. And so I went and wrote 4 additional pages to insert, and Doug did a really good job on those.
Right. Well, is that 7? Thanks for the question. Really appreciate it. Hope that answers your question. You guys touched on it a little bit when I was talking to Nasser. I had him on a stream one time, and we were talking. And his writing process is he kind of just starts the story and then lets it develop as it goes. He's, if I remember correctly, and if you watch this, Nasser, and I get this wrong, feel free to call me out on it. He doesn't really like to do the outline. Like
Nasser is the sworn enemy of outlines.
Is it? Yeah. Okay.
I've seen him. I like where people talk about how outline is useful for me, and rather than just saying, "Oh yeah, I'm sure that's useful for you, but it doesn't work for me," great. He just weighs in and just makes war. You're like, no, outlines are bad. You should be writing when you're outlining. It's hilarious. I love it.
Well, I can't he's written a lot more than I have, so I'm not going to argue with him. Plus, when he posts his little post about doing 15,000 words in a day, it's like, okay, dude, you're way ahead of me on that. So, what about you, Vaughn? You do outlines and all that stuff? You do do the proper writing treatment?
Yeah, man. Yeah. I don't build a skyscraper without blueprints.
Right.
Like I love my structure and I love the note part. And what's fun is I get to come up with all these different, like, I don't make it a rigid structure. Like it starts off like a sketch on a notepad, but it turns into something more refined as I go over it again and again. And I write all these notes for just random fun ideas for different things. It could be something as simple as a line a character says, or a different or cool action that happens. But I mean, so I still have that creative flow that Nasser, I think, is gunning for, that he feels good about with his writing. I'm just doing it in a notepad file on my computer, just stream of consciousness, having fun with it. I recently decided to do a stream of consciousness structure for like this happens, like beat sheet. and not worry too much about like beginning, middle, and end. And it's come out okay. Like I'm seeing if I can feel when I need to do the different turning points in the story. Like, oh, here's my midpoint. Here's this. Like if I could just feel my way through it, if or not. So I'm kind of testing myself. It's almost like a workout. But more than anything, I'm just like Doug Tenopple. I'm a stickler for structure, and 3-act structure works and appeals to our minds. It satisfies us for a reason. So I think Stephen King,
Brian Hill did a thing for YouTube
yeah.
where he talked about how 3-act structure, it's not like, we can analyze it, but he thinks that it emerges from our brains, like it's natural. It's the way that stories are supposed to be. And the reason that it works is because it resonates deeply with something in all of our brain. It's already predisposed to comprehend that.
Yeah. I agree. That guy knows his stuff too. I really like the stuff he says. I think the 3-act structure is something that's deeper than we give it credit for, and is innately appealing to the way we experience the world, and the way our emotions shift as you carry someone through a story, and then you give them that satisfying ending. It's magic, man, and it appeals to something greater in us for sure. So.
Right. Well, here's a question I want to ask you guys, since we're talking about this, and since lately I've been a student of writing, trying to be a little bit more, I don't know, structured, try to improve myself in that area a little bit. When I find myself struggling, and this happens with art a lot as well, when I'm drawing and things like that. I'll start to write, and I like to write prose, right? I like to write in like novel format or manuscript format or whatever. And so I have an outline and this, that. I always struggle with the ending. Like I want to come up with the ending when I'm coming out with my outline and things, but I can never see the ending, right? And that seems to be where I get stuck at. And it's just like when I do art sometimes. I'll noodle on a piece of art, and I'm not seeing the final piece. And that's when my pieces don't come out the way I want. Now, when I sit down and do a piece of art and I know exactly what I'm going for, I know in my head what I want it to look like. So I'll slap down construction lines, and then I know I'm not worried if it doesn't look really, really good to begin with, because I know that I'm going to go in there and fine tune it, and do the final line art and the rendering and things. And then bam, it comes out and I'm done. I'm like, yeah, I'm proud of this. And it's the same way with writing for me, I think, as well. And I don't know if you guys kind of getting the gist of what I'm talking about, but with writing, it's kind of the same way for me. I was talking with a friend of mine who's a writer, and I tell him, I said, man, I'm getting stuck on this. He goes, you're getting stuck because you're not spitting out your idea. Just throw your ideas on the paper and then go back and reread it. Then you can start to work out all the particulars, right? You clean it up and do your proper sentence structure, or replace an idea here with something better, or
Sorry.
Yeah.
The first book that I wrote, I wrote most of it in a bar. And I'd get not drunk, but happy. And that actually helped I had to focus all of my mind on writing as a result of that. And it worked out fine. The result was good. The only thing is I had to go in and clean up a lot of spelling and grammar errors, because, when I was happy, I wasn't that grammatical or good at spelling.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. One of my professors literally said, "Can I cuss on this? Can we let it out?"
Oh yeah, go ahead.
He'd say, "Shit it out,"
Uh-huh.
and I didn't know, and then later I realized how valuable such a blunt term was, because when you shit it out, you get it done, and done is better than perfect. And part of writing is rewriting, and refining it later is totally doable. I mean, I'm rewriting Monster MD, and I've lost track of how many times I've rewritten this, because it started as a movie script that then turned into a comic book script, and I kept it more indie for that new draft of comic book. Every movie script goes through at least 3 or 4 drafts. Then I did a comic book script. Then I redrafted that, and I kept it kind of simple and indie for this indie artist I was working with back then, who is not the current artist on Monster MD. And now I'm rewriting it for this new team I have for this Indiegogo. And it's time to up my game and really build it up and make it bigger and better and add to it. So it's okay if you like dawdle. I mean, I've seen a lot of writers, just to get it out, they will write things that are very on the nose and not that great. And they know it's not that great and they're not worried. It's that whole trick of getting yourself to where you won't worry or let it bug you, and you know that you're going to be able to come back to it later and refine it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things you can do, I mean, my assumption is for the most part we're all working in word processing programs. But one of the things you can do as you're doing that is to have a little print notebook that you're making notes, and you can kind of, if you run into troubles, you can, start outlining, okay, this is what I got, where do I want to go? And there was a comic book artist named Luke McKay that taught me something very important, and this would apply both to comics and to books. And he said, when you get to a section, or a book, or a section of the book, or a page, a panel, I don't care. If you get stuck, step back and say, what do I want to happen here? And write that down.
Yeah.
This is the thing that happens here. And then once you have clarity about that, and clarity is really important to get to. Once you have clarity about that, then you can, work in okay, well, all right, this is what has to happen here. Okay, what has to be true for that to happen? Well, this character has to do this, and he has to say this to this person, and will that fit on this page? Maybe we can refine it a bit, bring it down. Obviously with comics, and unlike novels, there's a lot more in terms of constriction of you're constricted by what you can represent visually in a certain space, right? But yeah, if you a notebook can help you to think on paper when you're stuck in your word processing program.
Right. Well, what I want to add to that is, and I think you've got it right. Like Vaughn, you were talking about, and Jeremy, you touched on it as well. Just Vaughn put it so eloquently, just shit it out, right? And I think in art, it applies the same way. It's the same way. Like, and I think that was the analogy I was trying to draw, was that, and while I'm doing art, when I know what the end result is, or what I want the end result to be, I'll just shit out the construction lines, right? I'll just do the pose, whatever the dynamics are, and it looks like ass when you first do it. But then I know in my head, okay, I'm going to clean this up, so it's going to be fine, right? But but sometimes you get stuck, and sometimes you're doing it, and you're like, this doesn't look good. Well, it's not supposed to look good yet. Just wait, And sometimes I have trouble with that. So I have there's a couple questions or a couple statements here in the chat. I want to include these guys.
Okay.
Thanks for coming in. First and foremost, I appreciate it. We're talking with Von Klaus and Jeremy Lott here. Let's see here. Michael Beacon says, I'll always start with the ending from now on. It's so much easier. Yeah, I think you're right. Knowing where you have to go makes the journey a lot easier, for sure. Albino Thunderbuns, great name, by the way, love it. Three act structure equals beginning, middle, and end. Yes. 5-act structure can do the same thing when it's used skillfully. Writing stream of consciousness can go anywhere, for better or worse. Yeah, and I think that's what they were touching on too. So yeah, some good points there. And so what got you guys on your projects now? Jeremy's is Movie Men. Make sure and go check that out right now. I've got the link in the description. He's got 1 day left, I believe. So what got you started on Movie Men? What inspired that story, and what made you think that going Indiegogo would be the best route?
Story, I used to go to a lot of movies in theaters. Now maybe I see a dozen a year, but I used to see 50, 70, something like that. And the more you go to, because of that, you're thinking of more than just the movies. The theater becomes a thing that you study. And at one point, they Regal Cinemas switched the uniforms, so they looked kind of like dorky X-Men uniforms.
Right.
So I actually went up to several workers there and said, "Do you feel like a superhero in that uniform?" They all said no. But so my head starts turning. Like what would a super team from a movie theater be like? How would that work? And then 5-10 minutes into a movie, you'll see an usher with a little glow stick comes in, and he goes to the X and he checks and he looks and makes sure everything's okay, and he leaves, right? And I'd seen that happen hundreds of times, and I saw it happen again one time, and I said, "What if we found a bomb?" And just boom, these things clicked. It took a while for it to all work itself out, but this idea of an usher finding a bomb and this somehow being related to them all getting powers and, well, wait a minute, if you get blown up by a bomb, you're dead. But wait, what if it's not a regular bomb? What would it be? What if it's a reality bomb? What it does is it blows the monsters off the screen and all the workers there have to go fight the monsters. Well, what would they fight the monsters with? Well, there are also, weapons in movies, and what if those appeared when they had to fight the monsters? Oh my gosh, movie man.
No, great. That's great. That's great. So what got you? Now I take it you have an artist, right? How'd you hook up with him? Has it been a pretty good relationship working with an artist? That's a great question. I always love to ask writers because since I'm an artist, I like to compare notes. So
Doug Curtis is the perfect artist for this project.
Mm-hmm.
He was absolutely just brilliant to work with. When I expected the art to come back in black and white, maybe he'd color it. I did not expect it to come back colored and lettered. But Doug has for many years. He's since 1996. He's done web comics. He's done a variety of web comics. He does the Flying Ferret. He does a daily strip called True North. He does a thing called I think Slammer. He's working on developing another one because he's a masochist. He's a very creative dude, and we are members of several overlapping Facebook groups. And I saw some of his work, and I just kind of sheepishly approached him and said, "Would you be interested in working with me?" And so I told him what I wanted in these movie men, and he did the designs. And you can actually, if you go to the Indiegogo, you can see his original designs because we used those along the side. And there's almost no changes from what he did to the final product. He's
Right.
he's very good at nailing it in one. He's I don't know. It's been great. He knows a lot more about visual storytelling than I do. And so it's wonderful to learn from that, to see how he translates what I write onto the page, and to hopefully carry that onto other artists. Though when it comes to Movie Men, I really hope that we do a lot of these comics together because I couldn't see anybody but Doug pulling it off as well.
Right.
Nice.
That's cool. And that's good. I'm glad to hear that you guys have a good working relationship and that you recognize that the visual part of it is also a big part of the storytelling in a graphic novel. There's a lot of writers that are very stringent, with artists, and it's like, no, you will do it this way. You will do it the way I wrote it, and it's like, well, it's not. Yeah.
You will do it this way. Yeah. I mean, there's a great line in Sergeant Bilko. I take a bullet for that guy. Well, not in the chest.
Right. In the toe. So let's see here. Vaughn, why don't you talk about what inspired Monster MD, working with your artist, and maybe where you found him, and why Indiegogo? Oh, by the way, before you start, I'm sorry. 7 of 9 says he just backed Monster MD, so congrats on that. And
appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you.
And he also says the art for Movie Men is amazing. So there you go. So yeah, Vaughn, why don't you go ahead and tell us?
I met Marco McCagney, I believe, through some comic book Facebook group. I saw that he was doing amazing art that was very monster oriented, but it was also just this kind of original style crafted from a little bit of manga influence mixed with animation, mixed with his own brilliant Italian style, man. He's an Italian artist who I just felt like might be a good fit, but I wasn't 100%. And I commissioned him to do one little splash piece for Monster MD to just promote it. At the time, I was working with an artist who, to be frank, was kind of bringing the project down and was not turning in good quality work anymore, and was kind of like resentful of me for whatever reason. I don't know why, but like because he just started to get more and more moody and kind of like rude towards me, and I was just blown away by that. Because I was just Mr. Happy, you know. Let's work on this and have a good time. This is going to be awesome type guy. And he just kind of shifted. So he made this piece for me. And I remember just being blown away about how well he got what I was trying to do out of the box. Like any artist can be a good artist and draw whatever you're doing really well. But there's something special when an artist really gets the aesthetic and the style and the attitude you're going for. And Marco had it. So I remember thinking, I wish I was working with this guy. And then everything kind of fell out with this other indie artist. And he turned in only sketches, if you even want to call them sketches, of the last 5 pages, and then just walked away. And so in a way, I really had an unfinished book. My project was kind of gutted. And right. And to be honest, after this bad experience with him, it just was like a kind of a rain cloud hanging over Monster MD, and I felt bad about it. I didn't think the quality wasn't where I wanted it, so I just kind of sat on it for a little bit. And then one day I asked Marco, hey, do you want to work on this? And he said, yeah. And I was blown away that he said, yeah, I thought his schedule would be way too busy. And it has been nothing but smooth sailing and fun times since. And his style, the way he brings what I'm, writing to life has been amazing. I've kept things good with him, but by just being like, easygoing and keeping the writing simple and effective. And sometimes you should write at the top of the page, this is what happens on this page, or this is what the mood should be for this page, to your artist to help guide them. I've learned to keep it more simple as I've gone along and gotten more into comic writing, because I'm more of a screenwriter guy.
Yeah.
Even though that should be kept simple too. But I like to embellish a little bit because I just love writing, and I love help trying to make people really see this vision I have. But with comics, it's still like simple can be more effective, because you're right. Your artist will understand what you're going for better and then draw it better. So it's something to keep in mind. And he's just been wonderful ever since, man. He's helped make this book come to life. Why it's on Indiegogo? Because it's time for me to step out and make something and share it with the world, man. And I don't want to just put it online. I want people to have a book they can hold, and I want to create more books and build something with this. So it's time to go beyond just making movies of, local animals and whatever and telling their story. I want to tell my stories.
So what inspired Monster MD? I think you mentioned that you went to medical school for a little bit. So did that have anything to do with it?
No, because back then I was younger, and I was avoiding doing my studies to draw comics, and I didn't have any doctor comics. All back then, it was the 90s, so my comics were all like, battle chasers and buff badasses with swords and, and fun stuff. But what I do come from a medical family. I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but all that happened was one day it hit me that it would be hilarious if someone had to be a doctor to monsters. It would just be a good Pixar movie. And so it went into the idea bank as like the cute movie idea that might be like a fun family movie, where a human has to work on all these crazy monsters, not get eaten, and then like learn to, he had to learn to find his place or something. And then a little bit later, it just sat in a file on my computer. And a little bit later, I had a nightmare, and the nightmare was of a guy who looked a lot like who did he look like? I think he looked like Ryan Reynolds. It was like in a dark van working on a werewolf who was chomping at him and clawing at him, and it was really horrific. And I woke up with these chills, and I thought my monster idea needs to be more like that. No more family stuff, no more Pixar. Let's make it a little more, adult and scary.
Mhm.
And so, and yet fun, because the guy like decks the monster, and I was like, that's hilarious. So it can still be hilarious.
Right.
It just has a little bit more of a horror adult edge. So
Right.
that's where Monster MD started getting turned into a short movie script. And from there, over the years, refined into a much better comic book script. So,
yeah, it looks good. It looks really good. So, and there's no denying it. I think you're fully funded in an hour, right? An hour or 2 hours or something.
yeah, in less than an hour and a half, we
Yeah.
were fully funded. I didn't make the goal too high though, so I just
Mhm.
I didn't know how many people were going to really come out, but it did well, and I'm just really happy to all the fans. It's just been amazing ever since.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you guys.
yeah. And congratulations to both of you, because you're both successful. So I think I'm going to have to take notes. Maybe we'll have a little private meeting, and you'll give me notes about how better to market my Indiegogo.
Great.
So,
I'd love to help. I actually made a YouTube video giving some advice the night of being successfully funded,
Mhm.
and I plan to do more. But I'd be happy to talk with you.
Yeah. I mean, I ran my campaign last November. Was it
Yeah, well, that's
November?
the problem right there. Don't launch in November.
I know
Yeah.
everybody says that. I do want. I don't want to. I'm not refuting that at all. It's just that I did research on it, and it didn't seem every piece of information I was able to glean off Kickstarter stats, because there's hardly any information on Indiegogo for some reason. It's all crowdfunding is usually related to Kickstarter, but according to those stats, November, December, January really wasn't that bad of a time to launch, according to the statistics that I was able to find. So, but there's no denying that I didn't succeed. But I can't tell whether or not I didn't succeed because of the time frame, or people just didn't like the product. That's another possibility. So
I liked the product. I backed it.
Mhm.
There was a lot of projects at the time that didn't succeed, and then that relaunched and then succeeded.
Yeah.
And you got very close, and I believe in that product, and I hope that at some point it comes back. That's all I gotta say.
Yeah, well, it will. But I appreciate the kind words. So, so we're running up on an hour, and I don't like to keep you guys too much longer. I want to hit the chat up again if you guys got any more questions for these two creators, these two writers, about writing, about their projects, anything. Feel free to ask. In the meantime, why don't you guys just kind of plug what you got going on? Maybe what's in the future for you, and what you like best about writing. How about that?
My project is Movie Men. There's going to be a sequel called Movie Men Meet Sporkman. Yeah, it's a crossover.
Sporkman, yes. Okay.
Nice.
Because I got to have the power of the spork behind me, and
Another great guy, by the way. He's a great guy.
I like. I mean, cynically, I say that the thing I like about writing is having written. It's good to get that little bugger out of your brain. But stories are powerful. They move people. They move me. And then not always in just deeply emotional ways, but sometimes they just amuse you and get you laughing, or that's great.
Yeah, they'd be inspirational by themselves. Yeah.
And Vaughn has written a more serious story. Movie Men is much more lighthearted, and it's definitely kid friendly too. And I wanted that was something that was very intentional. I don't think there are enough comics that are kids can enjoy. So I was I'm going to be a father for the first time in July, and I think that inclined me towards doing stories that are more for kids.
Well, congrats. Yeah, congrats on the father thing. You better get all the sleep you can get right now.
Yeah, and be ready, man, because I still remember to this day walking into my comic book store for the first time as a little kid, and my dad tried to get me to read the kid comics. he held out the Uncle Scrooge comics, and I just went, no, I want this Wolverine comic, and I'm going home with it right now.
Indeed.
Mm. Well, that's great. So you've got Movie Man 2 crossover with Sporkman that's coming next, right? And and you guys don't forget he's got 1 day left on the campaign, so go over there and back it. The link is in the description. And so Vaughn, how about you? Monster MD, anything else coming up? Let me know what's going on.
What's going on with me? I've got a lot, man. I've got a short story about a Cyclops seeking revenge on Zeus for stealing his woman. Film noir version of kind of like Greek gods, where guns have the powers of different gods. And our Cyclops out for revenge, who definitely needs one of these god guns, these special imbued god guns to kill Zeus, ends up only finding a Cupid gun. So we get to see how he works with that to take his revenge for the one he lost. He also was banished from being a god and had his eye plucked out, so he's still cycloptic by the man Zeus himself. So it's a cool little revenge short that I'm working on for a anthology with Narwhal called Megaton that we hope to do a campaign for. We don't know exactly when. We need to get all the art and stories done. And I'm also working on a cyberpunk story right now that I think could maybe turn into a pretty sweet book in the future, but that's pretty new. So there's not much to say other than I hope you're ready for a main character in a cyberpunk story that has no cyber implants or anything. So he's kind of an alien to his own world. And it's called Havocer, and it's going to be bad ass.
So it's like a cyberpunk thing, but this time with the Amish.
Yeah, Amish punk. Yeah, no, he's actually he's still kind of sci-fi because he is a clone. He was designed in a lab for war, and there's no war, and he's trying to live this like pious life in a loft at a church, and then he gets drawn into this, cyberpunk crazy world, and all this other fun stuff. So it's a fresh top. It's a fresh one.
That's crazy. With Cyberpunk 2077, the game coming out here probably next year or whatever, and a lot more interest in Cyberpunk's going to be rolling around.
Right.
I actually started working on a Cyberpunk story as well, but I'm a big. My ancestors are from Norway, okay, and so I'm big into Vikings and Norse mythology and things like that. So I'm working on a story of a postmodern. It's hard to explain. He's not actually Thor, but he's had something happen to him that actually altered his physiology, and so he doesn't age. Okay, it's not that he's immortal; he just doesn't age, and so it takes place in more of a not far future, but near future society, and so a lot of people have told me, well, it's kind of cyberpunkish, and I said, well, some of the denizens of the world, they have implants and stuff, but it's not. I guess maybe I keep telling them maybe it is cyberpunk. I don't know, but that's not the main gist of the story. So I thought that was pretty cool. So Kennel Hare just shows up. Oh man, we're almost done, Kennel. But if you got any questions for these guys, shout them out. We'll get them in.
Yeah. I unfortunately have another interview, and I've really loved chatting with you guys, and I have to go to that one now. I wish I could just sit around answering questions all night. This is fun. But yeah, I'm going to have to leave.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming on, man. We're going to close it up anyways. Make sure to check out Monster MD. It's up on Indiegogo right now. The link is in the description. Congratulations to you both. Successfully funded. And I hope you guys get even more backers before it's all said and done. So I'll be looking forward to both of those books. So,
man, thanks so much for having me, man. It's a really fun time.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys coming out, and appreciate the chat for coming out. And if you watch it later, please leave a comment. Let me know how it's going, what you thought. Hit the like button. Hit the I can't even talk. What's up? Hit the subscribe button too. Yeah. So And we'll close it out right here. And y'all have a great day. Thanks for showing up. Appreciate it.